yeah, I think I could never really imagine doing anything else other than being an artist of some kind. I knew whatever I did, it would have to involve making images. So a pivotal moment for me was going back to art school. I had gone to get my bachelor's a long time ago in the early 2000s, and then I taught for over a decade and exhibited. I always kind of missed that art school environment. There's something about it that's challenging and invigorating, and I just always knew I wanted to go back and get an MFA, so I did that in 2017. And I went in with an idea of what I wanted to make. If you enter an MFA program, your goal is to create some kind of definitive statement that sort of defines you as an artist. And what I had in mind ended up being completely different and not actually coming into fruition at all. I had all these figurative ideas, and they just didn't resonate with anybody else, particularly my professors. And I got a little frustrated. I just started painting abstractly, just to make something. And that's when their interest kind of perked up a little bit, and I started to point out different things I was doing that they found interesting that I hadn't considered before. And that just led to this whole new exploration of abstraction. And I think their guidance really helped me find a way to make abstract images that were interesting to me. When I start a painting or a series of paintings, I intentionally start with just a very basic set of parameters that I want to work within for that artwork. My best work comes out of a creative flow, and that comes from improvising. That comes from just getting a surface, getting some colors, and just going to work, trying different things, experimenting. And so I really can't have a recipe for a painting. I can't, have too clear an idea of what I want from it, because it's going to have a mind of its own. The process really starts to dictate so what's the best solution to make a particular painting the best that it can be. I use a lot of different techniques when I paint, and I think instead of trying to find a technique that I can use over and over again, I think I'm more interested in finding a whole range of different techniques that I can mix and match and continuously find new uses for and find new ways of creating different kinds of images with. Some examples of tools that I use. For example, I use this paint sprayer, and it's very basic, it's not very expensive, it's not really a professional tool, but it's very flexible. It allows me to buy these different attachments where I can create different spray patterns. So all the parts of my paintings where you see sprayed elements that look like they're from a spray can, they're actually from that. I don't use spray cans at all. One thing that's nice about that is that I can customize the paint that goes in there. I can adjust the viscosity, the transparency, all these different elements, and then of course the color. I like to use odd objects that I find in the hardware store and other places. So for example, this is a window screen. This creates sort of a pixelated effect, but it also makes bubbles in the paint. And so I've found some interesting and sort of unexpected and weird uses for this that I'm going to keep exploring because I really like it. It's quite subtle. It doesn't, it's not so overpowering, but it adds nuance to the layers that I'm making. This is another tool that, again, I found this at a hardware store. It's just a steel plate that's perforated, and I built this dam around it so I can fill this with paint and create some pretty interesting marks with this. This one's a lot less subtle, a lot harder to control, but I think some of the more interesting results from it are actually when I don't just paint through it, but actually use it as almost like a stamp. So I could actually paint something on this side and make an impression with it. So, for example, that is something you can see here. So that's maybe an unexpected result from that tool. It left this impression, and created this unique mark that I didn't expect. That just happened in the stream of consciousness of making this painting. So I'm always looking for things like that, things that are surprising, things that just look interesting, and then I can keep manipulating those things. I can keep using them and finding different ways to mix them with different techniques. Yeah, I'd like people to be able to look at my work and just have it change their state of mind a little bit. I want you to look at it and start to notice things that weren't there before. I want you to be able to discover things in it, just on a purely visual level. And then what I hope is that as you continue to look at the work, that maybe it'll remind you of something, or maybe a certain feeling will come to mind, and maybe you can start to consider, okay, why did I respond that way, and what am I dealing with? What's the meaning there for myself, right? I think music is really the creative fuel for my work. I tend to think of my images almost in musical terms, where I'll attach certain textures to certain sounds, or certain paintings to certain genres of music, for example. It's always in my ears while I'm working, and it really does help me find a creative flow. And so it's so important for me for those reasons. I think one thing I really especially get inspired by when I experience music is just the way that musicians layer different compositional elements, whether those are rhythms or textures or melodies or harmonies. But I definitely lean more toward the textural and the rhythmic side, actually. I listen to a lot of instrumental music, a lot of really loud music, a lot of ambient, ethereal music. I mean, there's just a huge range, but it has a real impact on my work.